The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a golden dome beneath the artificial stars. Representatives from 100 different worlds sat in their designated areas, each species maintaining careful distance from their neighbors. The air hummed with translation devices, converting thousands of different languages into something resembling order. Ambassador Thexalar of the Hegemony Council stood at the center podium, his blue-scaled form radiating confidence. His four arms gestured dramatically as he spoke, his translator rendering his words in the common tongue for all to hear. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Thexalar began, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. "Today we address a matter of galactic security, a pest problem, if you will." Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The hegemony was known for their harsh solutions to what they called minor problems. 3 rotations ago, a species calling themselves humans violated our sacred territory. They placed a colony ship on Kepler 442b, a world blessed by our ancestors and claimed by hegemony law for over 2,000 cycles. Ambassador Chen sat quietly in the human delegation area. She was a small woman by galactic standards, wearing a simple blue uniform that looked primitive compared to the elaborate robes and technological enhancements of other delegates. Her dark eyes remained fixed on Thexalar as he spoke. "These humans," Thexalar continued, "ignored our warnings. They built their little settlement. They dug into our soil. They polluted our sacred air with their primitive technology." His voice grew louder. "They dared to call our world their home." The hegemony delegation behind him nodded agreement. They were an impressive sight. Tall, scaled beings with natural weapons and technology that could level mountains. Their military record was legendary. They had never lost a war. "We offered them a choice," Thexalar said. "Leave peacefully, and we would consider their violation a simple mistake, but they refused. They demanded we respect their legal claim, under something they called Galactic Settlement Law." He made a sound that might have been laughter, as if insects could negotiate with giants. The Vulcarian representative, a massive creature covered in metallic plates, spoke up. "What is the human population on this world?" 800,000, Thexalar replied dismissively. "Men, women, and children, all will be removed." "And their total population across all worlds?" Thexalar paused, consulting his datapad. "Our intelligence suggests perhaps 50 million, spread across maybe 20 worlds. They are a young species, barely 300 years since their first interstellar flight." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. 50 million was nothing. The hegemony alone had 30 billion citizens across 40 worlds. "Their technology?" asked the crystalline Zephyrian delegate. "Fusion power, chemical rockets, primitive projectile weapons." Thexalar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "They still use something called gunpowder in their weapons. Their ships move so slowly that our patrol vessels could circle their planets before they completed a single orbit." More murmurs, these filled with disdain. The galaxy had moved beyond such primitive tools millennia ago. Ambassador Chen raised her hand. The gesture was so small, so human, that several delegates had to adjust their visual enhancers to notice her. "The human delegation requests permission to speak," announced the council moderator, a floating blob of intelligent gas from the ethereal collective. Chen stood slowly. At 5 feet 4 inches, she barely came up to Thexalar's waist. Her voice was calm, clear, and completely without fear. "Ambassador Thexalar, thank you for bringing this matter to the council's attention. I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly. You are declaring war on humanity because we settled on a world that you abandoned over 2,000 years ago?" "We did not abandon Kepler 442b," Thexalar snapped. "We performed the sacred withdrawal, preserving the world for future generations." "I see. And this sacred withdrawal involved removing all hegemony presence from the world?" "Of course. That is the nature of sacred withdrawal." Chen nodded politely. "So the world was empty when we arrived. No inhabitants, no active claims, no posted warnings in any standardized galactic language." The sanctity of the world should have been obvious to any civilized species. Ah, Chen made a note on her tablet. And your response to our presence is total warfare? Not negotiation? Not compensation? Not a shared settlement arrangement? Thexaler's scales darkened with irritation. We do not negotiate with pests. You have 29 rotations to evacuate all humans from Kepler 442b. After that, the hegemony will begin purification operations. Purification, Chen repeated slowly. That means what, exactly? Complete sterilization of all human presence. We will not tolerate contamination of our sacred spaces. The hall fell silent. Several delegates looked uncomfortable. The hegemony was known for their brutal efficiency, but declaring genocide so casually was extreme even for them. Chen stood quietly for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you for clarifying your position, Ambassador Thexalar. I want to ensure there's no misunderstanding. You are formally declaring war on humanity with the intent to commit genocide against all human settlers on Kepler 442b. If that is how you wish to interpret our righteous actions, yes. Chen made another note. And this declaration is made before the full Galactic Council, broadcast to all member worlds, and entered into official records? Obviously. Chen smiled. It was a small expression, barely visible to most of the delegates, but somehow it made several of them deeply uncomfortable. Excellent. I hereby formally acknowledge the hegemony's declaration of war against humanity. We accept your terms. Thexalar blinked, his four eyes focusing on the small human woman. You accept? We request a standard 30-day grace period for administrative purposes. Surely the mighty hegemony can grant this small courtesy. Thexalar preened at the flattery. Of course. 30 rotations. Use them wisely, little human. Perhaps you can evacuate some of your people before the purification begins. Chen bowed politely. Thank you for your generosity. I believe that concludes our business here. As she turned to leave, her aide, a nervous young private named Martinez, hurried after her. Once they were outside the chamber, he whispered urgently, Ma'am, shouldn't we be organizing evacuations? Warning Earth, calling for help? Chen's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Private Martinez, open a quantum burst channel to Earth immediately. Priority Alpha clearance. Yes, ma'am. What's the message? Chen stopped walking and looked directly at her aide. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Martinez's blood run cold. Message begins. Case Nightmare Green is now in effect. Total war protocols authorized. The hegemony has formally declared genocide against all human settlements. Rules of engagement are now weapons-free. Repeat, weapons-free. Admiral Chen sends her compliments to Fleet Command and wishes them good. Hunting. Message ends. Martinez stared at her. Ma'am, what is Case Nightmare Green? Chen resumed walking toward their shuttle. It's the protocol humans created for exactly this situation, Private. The one where some arrogant species thinks we're weak because we're small and prefer diplomacy. But the hegemony has superior numbers and technology. Chen's laugh was soft and completely without humor. Private, the hegemony just made the single worst tactical decision in galactic history. They attacked humanity when they thought we were weak and helpless. As they reached their shuttle, Chen paused at the ramp. She looked back at the massive council building, then at the stars visible through the dome. They have no idea what we really are, she said quietly. But they're about to find out. Martinez felt a chill run down his spine. Ma'am? Chen's expression was almost peaceful. The galaxy is about to learn why, in all of human history, the most dangerous thing anyone could ever say was, I'm from Earth, and I'm here to help. The hegemony just declared war on the species that turned warfare into an art form. She boarded the shuttle without another word, leaving Martinez to stare at the stars and wonder exactly what he'd gotten himself into. In the depths of space, quantum signals raced toward Earth at faster than light speeds, carrying a message that would change the galaxy forever. The humans had been provoked, and everyone was about to remember why that was a very, very bad idea. 30 days had passed since the hegemony's declaration of war. Fleet Admiral Jektol of the Hegemony 3rd Battle Group sat in his command chair aboard the massive dreadnought Eternal Glory, watching the blue-green world of Kepler 442b grow larger on the view screen. "Status report," he commanded, his scaled fingers drumming impatiently on the armrest. 47 ships in formation, Admiral," reported his tactical officer. "All weapons charged, shields at maximum. Long-range sensors detect human settlements across the northern continent." Jektol nodded with satisfaction. This would be a simple operation. Humans had primitive fusion weapons at best. His fleet could glass the entire planet from orbit without breaking formation. "Any sign of human fleet activity?" "Negative, sir. A few small cargo vessels fleeing the system. Our sensors detect—" "Wait." The tactical officer's crest darkened with confusion. "Admiral, I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface." "Define unusual." "The humans appear to have built—" "Sir, they've fortified the entire landmass. Every major settlement shows military-grade shielding and what looks like orbital defense platforms." Jektol's mandibles clicked with amusement. "They built a few defensive positions in 30 days? How quaint. Begin orbital bombardment. Target the largest city first." The Eternal Glory's main guns charged with a deep thrumming sound. Energy beams lanced down toward the human settlements, expecting to see explosions and fire. Instead, massive shield bubbles flared to life across the planet's surface. The hegemony weapons struck the barriers and scattered harmlessly. "What?" Jektol shot to his feet. "How are they generating that much power?" "Sir, our intelligence was wrong about their technology level. These aren't primitive fusion reactors, energy output suggests." "Admiral, these readings are impossible. They're generating more power than our dreadnought." Before Jektol could respond, his communications officer shouted, "Admiral, hyperspace signatures, multiple contacts emerging from fold space." The view screen shifted to show space around Earth's system. One by one, ships began dropping out of hyperspace. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. "Sir," the sensor operator's voice cracked with disbelief, "I count over 50,000 ships and the numbers are still climbing." Jektol stared at the display. But these weren't military vessels. He saw cargo freighters, passenger liners, mining, ships, even what looked like modified school buses with weapons grafted onto their hulls. "They're all armed," reported the tactical officer. "Every single civilian vessel has been retrofitted with military-grade weapons. Admiral, some of these modifications violate every galactic weapons treaty ever signed." "Those are cargo ships," Jektol said slowly. "Mining barges. How did they—" His question was cut short as energy beams erupted from the human fleet. But these weren't the clean, efficient plasma bolts the hegemony used. These were crude, improvised, and completely terrifying in their variety. One human cargo ship fired what appeared to be a stream of superheated metal slugs. Another launched missiles that split into dozens of smaller warheads mid-flight. A modified passenger liner opened fire with something that looked like industrial mining lasers strapped together. "Shields down to 60%, shouted his engineer. "Admiral, their weapons are penetrating our barriers." "That's impossible. Our shields can stop anything short of a supernova." "Sir, they're not trying to overpower our shields. They're finding weak spots. Their targeting computers are learning our shield frequencies in real time and adapting their weapons accordingly." Jektol watched in growing horror as his perfect fleet came under assault from what looked like a space junkyard. Human ships darted between his dreadnoughts like angry insects, their improvised weapons scoring hit after hit. "Return fire, all batteries." The hegemony fleet responded with disciplined volleys of plasma fire. Several human ships exploded in brilliant fireballs, but for every ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from one of the human vessels." "Put it through." A grainy hologram appeared, a middle-aged human woman in a patched flight suit sitting in what looked like the bridge of a converted garbage scow. "Hegemony Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Wong of the freighter Lucky Strike. Just wanted you to know. You picked the wrong species to mess with." "Your vessel is outgunned and outnumbered," Jektol replied. "Surrender now, and you will be granted—" "A quick death," the human woman smiled. Admiral, you've made two mistakes. First, you assumed our cargo ships were defenseless. Second, you assumed we'd fight fair. Before Jek'Tol could respond, Wong's ship accelerated directly toward the Eternal Glory. She's on a collision course. Evasive maneuvers. Shoot her down. But the human ship didn't pull away. Even as hegemony fire tore holes in her hull, even as her engines began to fail, she kept coming. Wong's final transmission cut through the static. Tell your people back home, every human knows how to die. We're about to teach you what that means. The Lucky Strike slammed into the Eternal Glory's port side. The explosion shook the massive dreadnought like a toy, and warning alarms screamed across the bridge. Multiple hull breaches, port shields offline, engineering reports catastrophic damage. But that was just one ship. Across the battlefield, other human vessels were doing the same thing. Damaged ships didn't retreat. They accelerated toward hegemony vessels, turning themselves into guided missiles. Admiral. The sensor operator's voice was pure panic. More hyperspace signatures, massive formations dropping out of fold space across the galaxy. The tactical display lit up like a constellation. Reports flooded in from hegemony territory. Human fleets emerging from systems that weren't even supposed to be inhabited. Bases under attack. Colonies burning. How many ships do they have? Jek'Tol whispered. Sir, preliminary reports suggest over 200,000 vessels across 40 different star systems, and they're all moving toward hegemony space. Jek'Tol's knees gave out and he collapsed into his command chair. 200,000? Our intelligence said they had maybe 100 ships total. Sir, we need to withdraw. We've lost 12 vessels and our shields are failing. And go where? They're attacking our homeworlds. The communications officer looked up from his console, his scales pale with fear. Admiral, I'm receiving reports from our outer colonies. The humans aren't just attacking military targets. They're broadcasting surrender demands. Surrender demands? They want total withdrawal from human space, reparations for the colony, and formal apologies. If we refuse, the officer's voice trailed off. If we refuse what? They'll continue their advance into hegemony core territory. Admiral, they're giving us the same choice they were given. Leave peacefully, or be removed by force. Jek'Tol stared at the view screen, watching human cargo ships dogfight with his advanced warships, and somehow winning. In 30 days, humanity had transformed from a primitive species into the most terrifying military force the galaxy had ever seen. Sir, the tactical officer said quietly, we're receiving long-range sensor data from the core worlds. There are more human fleets out there. Many more. They were already in position before we even arrived here. What are you saying? I'm saying they knew we were coming, Admiral. They knew exactly when and where we'd attack. This wasn't a desperate defense. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. This was a trap. On the view screen, another group of human ships emerged from hyperspace. These weren't converted civilian vessels. These were purpose-built warships, sleek and deadly. Their hulls painted with symbols that meant nothing to the hegemony but everything to humanity. Jek'Tol realized with growing horror that his fleet hadn't found a weak, primitive species hiding on a backwater world. They had awakened something that had been waiting in the darkness for someone to make exactly this mistake. All ships, he commanded, his voice barely steady. Begin immediate. Withdrawal to hegemony space. Maximum acceleration. As the surviving ships of his fleet limped away from the human colony, Jek'Tol couldn't shake one terrible thought. If this was what humanity could do in 30 days, what would they be capable of in 30 more? Behind them, the human fleets regrouped and began their inexorable advance toward hegemony territory, leaving only one message broadcast on all frequencies. You wanted war. Congratulations. You got it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened just 3 days after the first reports reached member worlds. The Great Hall, normally filled with calm diplomatic discourse, buzzed with panicked voices from a dozen different species. Ambassador Thexaler sat in his delegation area, his previously confident bearing now hunched and defeated. His scales had turned a sickly gray color, and his 4 hands trembled as he reviewed the datapad containing casualty reports from the hegemony fleet. High Chancellor Velthus of the Centauri Federation stood at the central podium, her crystalline form catching the light in sharp, angry flashes. "Order, we must have order." The hall gradually quieted, though nervous whispers continued to echo through the chamber. "We have received disturbing reports from across the galaxy," Velthus announced. "Ambassador Thexelar, please present your findings to the Council." Thexelar rose slowly, his movements lacking their usual grace. When he spoke, his voice was hollow, defeated. "Fellow delegates, I must inform you that our intelligence regarding the human species was severely flawed." He activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. A 3-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, dotted with thousands of red points. Each red marker represents a confirmed human presence. As of 2 days ago, we had identified 23 human colonies. The assembled delegates murmured approval. 23 colonies was significant for such a young species, but not threatening. "As of this morning," Thexelar continued, his voice cracking slightly, "we have identified 217 human settlements." The hall erupted in shocked exclamations. Several delegates stood up, demanding clarification. "That's impossible," shouted the Vulcarian representative. "We monitor all hyperspace traffic. We would have detected such massive colonization efforts." Thexelar's mandibles clicked in bitter amusement. "That's what we thought. But the humans didn't use hyperspace for their expansion. They used generation ships, massive vessels traveling at sublight speeds for decades or even centuries." He manipulated the display, showing flight paths stretching across the galaxy like a spider's web. While we were focused on hyperspace corridors and established trade routes, human colony ships were quietly spreading throughout the galaxy. They've been at this for over 300 years. The Zephyrian delegate, a creature of pure energy, contained in a crystalline matrix, flickered with agitation. 300 years? Our first contact with humans was only 20 years ago. "Precisely," Thexelar said. "The humans we encountered were just the ones who wanted to be found. The rest have been developing in isolation, each colony becoming unique, specialized." He paused, studying his datapad with growing horror. "Each colony has developed its own military doctrine. The ice worlds have perfected warfare in absolute zero conditions. The desert colonies specialize in thermal combat and energy weapons. The asteroid belt miners—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "They've turned entire asteroid fields into kinetic bombardment platforms, mobile weapons of unimaginable destruction." The mathematical display showed population estimates. The numbers climbed steadily: 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion. Conservative estimates put the human population at over 50 billion individuals spread across more than 200 worlds. And all of them, every single one, is now mobilized for war. Councillor Yexhai of the Mollusk Confederacy raised a tentacle in question. "Surely their technology remains primitive. Our report suggested fusion power and chemical propulsion." Thexelar's laugh was bitter and filled with self-loathing. "That's what they wanted us to think. Our intelligence now suggests that humans have been deliberately downplaying their technological capabilities for decades." The holographic display shifted to show recordings from the recent battles. Hegemony ships being torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have worked, couldn't have worked according to galactic understanding of physics. Their primitive fusion reactors are actually contained antimatter systems designed to appear less threatening. Their chemical rockets incorporate gravity manipulation technology we thought was purely theoretical. And their weapons? Video. Footage showed human ships firing streams of matter traveling at significant fractions of light speed, creating explosions that lit up entire star systems. "They've been studying us," Thexelar said quietly. "Every trade negotiation, every cultural exchange, every diplomatic meeting, they were learning, watching, preparing." The hegemony military advisor, General Krektol, stepped forward. His battle-scarred form commanded respect even from other species. "The humans don't fight like us," he reported grimly. "They don't follow established military doctrine. In the Battle of Rigel 7th, they converted a passenger liner into a weapon by filling it with antimatter and ramming it into our orbital platform. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. At Vega Station, they turned their own colonies, Mass Driver, a tool for launching cargo into orbit, into a planet-cracking weapon. They destroyed their own infrastructure to deny it to us. The general's voice grew more strained with each example. They don't just fight to win territory or resources. They fight to prove a point. Every battle costs them dearly, but they keep coming. And they're learning from each engagement, adapting faster than our strategists can compensate. Ambassador Chen's seat in the human delegation area remained noticeably empty. Veltas looked around the chamber. Where is the human representative? A small holographic projector activated in the human section. Chen's image appeared, but she was clearly not on the station. "Greetings, Chancellor Veltas," Chen said politely. "I apologize for not attending in person, but I'm currently aboard the UES Determination, coordinating our response to the hegemony's continued aggression." "Ambassador Chen," Veltas said carefully, "the Council is deeply concerned about the escalation of this conflict. Surely there must be room for negotiation." Chen's expression remained perfectly diplomatic. "The hegemony declared genocide against human civilians. They have shown no interest in ceasing hostilities. We are simply defending ourselves. But the scale of your response is proportional to the threat posed to our people," Chen interrupted. Smoothly. "The hegemony wanted to exterminate 800,000 colonists. We're ensuring that never happens again. To anyone." Thexaler finally spoke up, his voice barely a whisper. We wish to negotiate a ceasefire." Chen's smile was polite and absolutely terrifying. "Ambassador Thexalar, you had 30 days to negotiate. You chose war instead. Now you have war. But surely you understand that continued conflict serves no one's interests." "On the contrary," Chen replied. "This conflict is serving our interests perfectly. For the first time in galactic history, every species now knows exactly what humanity is capable of when threatened." She leaned forward slightly, and something in her expression made even the massive Vulcarian representative step back from his screen. "We never wanted war. But since you insisted on starting one, we're going to finish it. Completely. Decisively. In a way that ensures no one ever makes this mistake again." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Finally, the elderly wise one of the ancient collective spoke, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. "In my time, I have seen species rise and fall. I have witnessed the birth and death of civilizations." He paused, his ancient eyes focusing on the space where Chen's hologram had been. "But I have never seen a species that could transform from apparent weakness to absolute power so quickly. We have not been sharing the galaxy with primitives." His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "We have been sharing it with the galaxy's apex predators, and they were kind enough to let us think we were in charge." As reports continued to flood in from across the galaxy, hegemony colonies burning, human fleets appearing in systems that were supposed to be uninhabited, entire sectors going dark as communication relays were systematically destroyed, one fact became crystal clear to every delegate in that chamber. The galaxy was about to change forever. And it would be humans. Who decided how? 6 months into what historians would later call the Awakening War, the galaxy watched in growing horror as humanity demonstrated something far worse than superior technology or numbers. They showed an understanding of warfare that went beyond anything any civilization had ever witnessed. Admiral Zexthul the Unconquerable stood on the bridge of his flagship, the pride of hegemony, staring at the tactical display showing the siege of Cronus VII. He had earned his title through 300 years of undefeated campaigns across 17 different wars. He had broken species that thought themselves unbreakable, but the humans were different. "Status report," he commanded, though he already knew the answer would disappoint him. "Day 47 of the siege, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. "Human forces remain entrenched on the planet's surface. Our orbital bombardment continues to have minimal effect." Zexthul's mandibles clicked in frustration. Cronus 7 should have fallen in hours. It was one planet defended by a mere 2 million human colonists against his fleet of 60 capital ships. The numbers were absurdly in his favor. Yet here they were, almost 2 months later, and the humans were still fighting. "They've converted the planet's industrial base into weapons manufacturing," reported his intelligence officer. "Every factory, every mining operation, every civilian facility has been transformed into a military asset. And their tactics?" The intelligence officer hesitated. "Unconventional, sir. They're not fighting like any military force in our databases. They adapt constantly. What works against them one day fails completely the next." Zexthul had seen this himself. Yesterday, his forces had developed a successful strategy against human ground defenses. Today, those same defenses had been completely reconfigured, turning his own tactics against him. "Sir," the communications officer called out urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." "From the human military command?" "No, sir. From a child." Zexthul's 4 eyes blinked in succession. "A child?" "A human juvenile, sir. She's requesting permission to board our flagship." The bridge fell silent. Several officers exchanged confused glances. "Put her through," Zexthul ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a young human female, perhaps 12 years of age by human standards. She wore a simple agricultural coverall and carried what appeared to be an eating utensil, some kind of flattened metal spoon. Her blonde hair was tied back with a piece of string, and her blue eyes held a clarity that made Zexthul deeply uncomfortable. "Admiral Zexthul," she said in perfect hegemony standard. "My name is Emma Chen Martinez, from New Kansas Colony. I understand you consider yourself unconquerable. Child, you should not be involved in warfare. Return to your parents." Emma's expression didn't change. "My parents died in your first orbital bombardment, Admiral, along with my little brother and my grandparents." Zexthul felt a flutter of something he rarely experienced, guilt, but he pushed it aside. War was war. "I am sorry for your loss, but I'm here to challenge you to single combat," Emma interrupted. "Winner takes the planet." The bridge erupted in laughter. Even Zexthul's battle-hardened officers couldn't contain their amusement. A child challenging the greatest military commander in hegemony history? "Child, I appreciate your courage, but are you afraid?" Emma asked simply. The laughter stopped. Zexthul's scales darkened with anger. "I am not afraid of anything, least of all a human child." "Then you accept?" Zexthul looked around his bridge. Every officer was watching him. To refuse a formal challenge would be seen as cowardice regardless of who issued it, and defeating this child would send a clear message to all humans about the futility of resistance. "I accept," he said. "Single combat, traditional weapons only." Emma smiled. It was not a child's smile. An hour later, Zexthul stood in the combat arena aboard his flagship, wearing his ceremonial battle armor and carrying the plasma blade that had carved his legend across the galaxy. Across from him stood a tiny human child in a basic environmental suit, holding a sharpened spoon. The assembled crews of both sides watched in disbelief. This was madness. "Combatants ready," announced the referee. "Begin." Zexthul moved with the speed and grace of a professional warrior. His plasma blade sang through the air, aimed at ending this quickly and mercifully. The blade passed through empty space. The child wasn't there anymore. Emma had moved, not fast, but with perfect timing. She was inside his guard, the improvised weapon in her hand sliding between the plates of his armor with surgical precision. Zexthul stumbled, purple blood flowing from the wound. He spun, bringing his blade around in a wide arc that should have cut the human in half. Again, she wasn't there. This time her spoon found a gap near his left shoulder joint. For the next 30 minutes, the galaxy's greatest warrior was systematically dismantled by a 12-year-old human girl with a piece of cutlery. Emma didn't move fast. She didn't display superhuman strength or impossible reflexes. She simply moved at exactly the right time, struck exactly the right places, and avoided every attack with movements that seemed almost casual. When Zexthul finally collapsed, his armor punctured in 17 places, Emma stood over him without even breathing hard. "How?" he gasped. Emma knelt beside him, her young face serious. "My grandfather was a soldier, Admiral. Before he died in your attack, he taught me something important." She gestured to the watching crowds, human and hegemony alike. "He said that being the best warrior isn't about being the fastest or the strongest. It's about understanding your opponent better than they understand themselves." She stood up, looking down at the defeated admiral. "You've won hundreds of battles because you fight like every other hegemony commander. You follow doctrine. You use predictable strategies. You think superior technology makes you superior warriors." Emma walked toward the exit, then paused and looked back. "But humans don't fight like other species, Admiral. We fight like humans. And the thing about humans is, we don't know when to quit." The footage of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. A child had defeated the hegemony's greatest warrior, not through luck or accident, but through pure tactical brilliance. But the real shock came with the follow-up reports. Emma Chen Martinez wasn't some prodigy or special operative. She was just a farm girl from an agricultural colony. Her grandfather had been a standard human soldier. Her weapons training consisted of weekend lessons in the colony's defense militia. She was, by human standards, completely ordinary. The galaxy began to understand something terrifying. If a random human child could defeat their greatest warrior through nothing but tactical thinking and determination, what were their actual military forces capable of? The answer came 3 days later, when human forces launched the Battle of Cronus VII's final phase. They didn't attack the hegemony fleet. They didn't break orbit to engage in space combat. Instead, they destabilized the planet's core. The last transmission from Cronus 7 was broadcast on all frequencies. "You want our world? You can have it. All of it. At once." The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. 2 million humans died in that blast, but so did 60 hegemony capital ships and their crews, caught in the gravity well when the planet became a brief artificial star. As rescue ships from both sides raced to the scene, one message rang out across the galaxy. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to make a point, and the point was simple. Attacking humanity cost more than anyone could afford to pay, even when they had to pay that cost themselves. The war had been raging for 18 months when the impossible happened. Ancient sensors deep in the void between galaxies began screaming warnings that hadn't sounded for a million years. The voidlings had returned. Supreme Commander Velthus stood in the emergency command center of the Galactic Defense Network, watching displays that showed nightmare creatures emerging from dark space. These weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were living things the size of moons, with technology that seemed to merge biology and physics in ways that hurt to contemplate. "How many?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Initial count suggests 3,000 entities, Chancellor," reported the sensor operator, his crystalline form flickering with fear. "They're moving toward the outer colonies of 7 different species." Velthus felt her hope crumble. The voidlings had been the galaxy's greatest nightmare before they mysteriously disappeared into deep space. Ancient records spoke of civilizations, consumed entirely, of entire star systems going dark, of defenders who fought these creatures and simply stopped existing. What about the humans and hegemony? Have they detected the threat? "Yes, Chancellor. Both species have picked up the voidling signatures." "Good. Send immediate communications to both parties. Tell them we need a ceasefire. This is an extinction-level threat. Every species must unite or—" "Chancellor," the communications officer interrupted. "We're receiving a response from the hegemony." Ambassador Thexalar's image appeared on the main screen. He looked haggard, his scales dulled with exhaustion and fear. The war with humanity had not been kind to his people. "Chancellor Velthus," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank the ancestors you've contacted us. The humans will have to cease hostilities now. Surely they understand that." The Voidling threat supersedes our local conflict. And the human response? We're waiting to... Thexelar was cut off as another communication channel activated. Ambassador Chen appeared in a second window, but she wasn't in her usual diplomatic office. Behind her, the bridge of a warship buzzed with activity, and the sound of weapons charging could be heard clearly. Chancellor Velthus, Ambassador Thexelar, Chen said briskly. I assume you're calling about the Voidling incursion. Ambassador Chen, Velthus said carefully. Surely you agree that this threat requires all species to unite. The Voidlings could destroy us all. Chen nodded. Absolutely correct, Chancellor. Thexelar sagged with relief. Then humanity agrees. To a ceasefire while we deal with this greater threat? Chen looked at him with an expression that might have been pity. Ambassador Thexelar, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. What do you mean? We're not calling a ceasefire, Chen explained, as if talking to a slow child. We're splitting our forces. The silence that followed was deafening. Splitting your forces? Velthus asked slowly. Half our fleets will continue prosecuting the war against the hegemony, Chen said matter-of-factly. The other half will engage the Voidlings. We're perfectly capable of fighting both wars simultaneously. Thexelar's mandibles gaped open. You can't be serious. The Voidlings are a galaxy-ending threat. We're a galaxy-ending threat, Chen corrected. That was before they ran into humans. The communication screens suddenly lit up with tactical displays showing the outer rim territories. Human fleets were moving toward Voidling formations, but other human forces continued their relentless advance toward hegemony core worlds. This is madness, Thexelar shouted. You're dividing your strength against two enemies. Chen's smile was sharp as broken glass. Ambassador, you're still thinking like a traditional military commander. You see two separate threats that require separate responses. She turned to look directly at him through the screen. But humans see two training exercises. Before either ambassador could respond, reports began flooding in from the combat zones. The first human Voidling engagement had begun. What followed defied every military doctrine in galactic history. Human ships, designed to fight other humans, proved equally effective against incomprehensible alien horrors. When Voidling entities used their reality-warping weapons to phase through solid matter, humans responded by flooding space with plasma webs that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When Voidling creatures tried to drain the life force from human crews, they discovered that humans had installed shielding, based on technology stolen from psychic species during their expansion across the galaxy. They're boarding Voidling entities, reported the tactical officer, disbelief clear in his voice. Human Marines are conducting ground assaults inside the Voidlings themselves. The display showed armored human soldiers moving through passages that hurt to look at, fighting creatures that shouldn't exist with weapons that somehow worked anyway. How are they adapting so quickly? Velthus whispered. Chen overheard the question. Because we've been preparing for this for decades, Chancellor. Every species we've encountered, every technology we've observed, every weapon we've studied, it all went into our contingency plans. She pulled up a holographic display showing thousands of classified human research projects. We have weapons, designed specifically for energy beings like the Zephyrians. Countermeasures for psychic attacks developed from studying the ethereal collective. Reality anchor technology reverse-engineered from ancient precursor ruins. Thexelar stared at the display in horror. You've been weaponizing contact with every species you've met. Learning from, Chen corrected. We never know what we might need to defend against. The tactical displays continued to update. Human forces weren't just fighting the Voidlings, they were winning. Entities that had consumed entire civilizations were being systematically destroyed by ships that looked like converted mining equipment. Impossible, Thexelar breathed. The ancient records say the Voidlings are invincible. The ancient records were written by species that fought like you do, Chen replied. Rigid tactics, predictable strategies, limited thinking. She gestured to the battlefield displays where human forces were using Voidling technology against the Voidlings themselves, turning captured entities into weapons. Humans fight like humans, And the thing about humans, Ambassador, is that we don't have any sacred cows. If it works, we'll use it. If it doesn't work, we'll break it until it does. A new report came in. The human fleet engaging the Voidlings had just captured one of their largest entities intact and was already reverse engineering its technology. Simultaneously, news arrived that human forces had broken through the hegemony's outer defense grid and were advancing on their industrial core worlds. Velthus looked between the two conflicts and felt a terrible understanding wash over her. You're not just fighting two wars, you're using them to make yourself stronger. Chen nodded approvingly. Now you're learning, Chancellor. Every battle teaches us something new. Every enemy shows us a new way to fight. The hegemony gave us experience in conventional warfare. The Voidlings are teaching us how to fight things that shouldn't exist. She paused, and her expression grew cold. And when this is all over, when both threats are eliminated, humanity will have learned from both conflicts. We'll be stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than ever before. As if to prove her point, reports began coming in of human forces implementing Voidling-derived technology into their anti-hegemony weapons. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity fought a war on two fronts against enemies that had each, separately, brought civilizations to their knees, and they were winning both wars. In that moment, every species in the galaxy understood one simple, terrifying truth. Humanity hadn't just been hiding their capabilities, they had been studying everyone else's weaknesses while preparing for threats that hadn't even arrived yet. The humans weren't just the galaxy's apex predators. They were the galaxy's contingency plan for everything else. 2 years after Ambassador Thexalar had stood before the Galactic Council and declared war on humanity, he knelt in the ruins of his homeworld's capital city, signing humanity's terms of surrender. The document was simple, written in clear language, that left no room for misinterpretation. Total withdrawal from all human territories, reparations for every human life lost, formal acknowledgement of war crimes, and most humbling of all, a public apology to the species they had tried to exterminate. Ambassador Chen stood quietly beside him, no longer wearing diplomatic robes, but the simple uniform of the newly formed Galactic Defense Force. Around them, the sounds of reconstruction filled the air. Human engineering crews working alongside hegemony survivors to rebuild what the war had destroyed. The signing is complete, Chen announced to the assembled representatives of 47 galactic species. The war between humanity and the hegemony is officially ended. But the real changes had begun long before this formal ceremony. Chancellor Velthus, now president of the reformed Galactic Council, stepped forward to address the gathering. Her crystalline form had gained new facets over the past 2 years, marks of wisdom earned through the galaxy's darkest period. The past 24 months have taught us much about ourselves and our place in the universe, she began. We learned that we had grown comfortable, complacent. We believed our technology and our numbers made us safe. She gestured to the humans, standing among them, no longer visitors or guests, but an integral part of galactic civilization. We learned that safety isn't about having the biggest fleet or the most advanced weapons. It's about having allies who will stand with you when the darkness comes. The Voidling War had ended 8 months ago, but the memories were still fresh. Every species had watched human forces systematically hunt down the ancient horrors, turning their own nightmare weapons against them. The final Voidling entity had been destroyed not by some superweapon, but by human soldiers in powered armor, fighting hand-to-hand in dimensions that shouldn't have existed. Admiral Sarah Wong, the same captain who had once commanded a converted garbage scow, now wore the insignia of Supreme Admiral of Galactic Defense. She stood to address the assembly. 24 months ago, you knew humans as traitors, diplomats, and colonists, she said. Some of you thought we were weak because we preferred negotiation to conflict. Others thought we were primitive because our technology looked outdated. She smiled, and even now, that expression made several delegates shift uncomfortably. The truth is, we are exactly what we've always been, practical. We prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. We study every threat, plan for every contingency, and when pushed, we fight with everything we have. A young Vulcarian delegate raised a plated hand. Admiral, our children learn about the war in their schools. They're told that humans are the galaxy's protectors now. But many adults still fear you. How do we move forward? Wong nodded thoughtfully. Fear can be healthy, delegate, but it shouldn't be paralyzing. Your children have the right idea. We're not your conquerors. We're your neighbors who happen to be very good at dealing with things that go bump in the night. The statistics spoke for themselves. Human colonies now served as early warning stations along the galaxy's rim. Human fleets patrolled the dark spaces between stars, watching for threats that might emerge. And whenever any species faced a crisis, pirates, natural disasters, or unknown threats, human ships were the first to respond. But perhaps the most profound change wasn't military at all. Dr. Elena Vasquez, formerly a xenoarchaeologist from the New Kansas colony, had been elected as the galaxy's first interspecies science director. Under her leadership, combined research teams were making breakthroughs that no single species had achieved alone. The voidling technology we've recovered is opening doors we never imagined, she reported. Working together, we've developed faster-than-light communication that doesn't rely on hyperspace, medical technology that works across species barriers, and defensive systems that exist in multiple dimensions. The galaxy had become a true community for the first time in its history, united not by conquest but by necessity and mutual respect. Ambassador Chen took the podium for what would be her final speech in this role. Tomorrow she would return to Earth to become humanity's first minister of galactic affairs. 2 years ago, the hegemony called humanity a pest species that needed extermination. I won't lie, that hurt. But it also taught us something important. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from species that had once viewed humans as inferior. Words have power. When you tell someone they're your enemy, you better be prepared for them to believe you. When you threaten their children, their homes, their way of life, you better be absolutely certain you can follow through. Her expression softened slightly. But we also learned that words can heal. Every species here has thanked humanity for our intervention against the voidlings. Those thanks mean more to us than any military victory. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a memorial in the center of the rebuilt city. Names were carved in stone in dozens of languages. Every being who had died in both wars, human and non-human alike. But the inscription at the base was simple, in universal script. Here we remember those who died learning the difference between being dangerous and being evil. May their sacrifice ensure we never forget which one to be. 5 years later, alien children across the galaxy would grow up knowing strange bedtime stories about the sleeping giants who lived among the stars. Stories that ended not with conquest or domination, but with a simple promise. If anything threatens you in the dark, call for the humans. They'll come. And in the deepest parts of space, where ancient threats still stirred and unknown dangers waited to be discovered, human ships continued their eternal patrol, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The galaxy had learned what humanity always knew. True strength isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about being there when others need you most, and being capable enough to make a difference when you arrive. Thexalar kept the original declaration of war in his private office, now transformed into a memorial room. Beneath it, a small plaque bore his personal inscription, "The galaxy's most expensive lesson. When you declare war on humanity, you don't just fight their armies. You fight their farmers, their teachers, their children, and their grandparents. You fight an entire species that has turned survival into an art form. And somewhere in the universe, that's exactly the kind of species you want on your side." In Dizhao, the end, humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had simply reminded everyone else what it meant to be neighbors, protectors, and friends. The humans had won more than a war. They had won the right to be trusted with everyone's tomorrow. ND